Welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to do a very quick tutorial on how to reduce noise when shooting with the Lumix G9 using high ISO. So you will have seen from some of my last videos on YouTube that I spent some time in bird hides in the north of Belgium. And when I was in those bird hides, I was actually shooting in low light and I had to shoot with high ISO. So I posted one of the images on my Facebook page and somebody commented, Luke. So Luke, thank you for the question. One of the advantages I have of not having a big following is that many of the people that do follow me, I actually know. I was very fortunate to meet Luke a couple of years ago at the Lowlands Festival in Antwerp. So Luke, thank you for checking my page out. And I'd already thought about making a video about this because I think one of the myths that we have with Micro Four Thirds cameras is that you can't shoot high ISO and the images get very noisy. But if you know how to treat those images in Lightroom and you know a little bit the tips and tricks of what to do, you can get very clean results. So that's the idea of today's video. Let's get into it. So when we use the sharpening and noise reduction tools in Lightroom, one of the things that we need to remember is it's a very localized adjustment. This is not about fixing shots that are out of focus. It doesn't matter how much sharpening you use in Lightroom, it's never going to fix a shot that is out of focus. In many of my videos, I talk about the relationship between your camera parameters, the shutter speed, the ISO, and shooting in aperture priority mode. And that there's a general rule of thumb that if you're shooting at a focal length, you want your shutter speed to be at least twice the focal length. It's a rule of thumb. Sometimes I shoot under that because in low light I need to have a slower shutter speed. But in general, I try to stick to that rule of thumb because I know shooting handheld, I'm more likely to get a sharp shot. So keep that in mind, because the worst thing that can happen is you come away from a day's shoot, you load your images in Lightroom to find that they're out of focus. So let's have a look at this, the images that I've got here and I've loaded into my Lightroom catalog, and I will explain the sharpening and noise reduction tools and how to use them. Okay, so you can see on the right hand side, with regards to the different tools that you can use in the develop module of Lightroom, we have a tab here which is listed as detail. And I've actually just loaded a very simple image of basically two grey tones, a dark grey tone and a light grey tone. And then I've zoomed in to 400%. And you can see on the right side here with my cursor, I'm just showing that you can see the line there between the two different tonal contrasts of grey. And that's an important point, is that when you're doing sharpening, it's all about actually adding contrast to the pixels. And that's why it's a very localized adjustment. So what we have here is we actually have 4 sliders for the sharpening tool. We have the amount of sharpening, the radius, the detail, and the masking. So obviously, if you want to sharpen the image, then you increase the slider to the right. We're going to take this up to the maximum to really over exaggerate what we see. And if I zoom in here, you can see the actual line. We now have a kind of a band across that line. The interface between the light grey and the dark grey, we kind of have this sort of margin. What you then do with the radius is the radius will actually tell you, it will sort of expand the width of those pixels around that margin. So if you increase it, you're sort of merging into those two tonalities. And if you decrease it, you're getting closer to the original division line on that actual transition between the light grey and the dark grey. For the detail, you can increase the detail, and this will again push a little bit more contrast, make the lights lighter, the darks darker, and as a result you can see there, as I've pushed the detail up to 80 on this particular image, you can now see a very distinct line. So if you were to zoom out, that would of course create a much more sharpened effect, but we actually don't want that, so we would bring the detail down. And then one of the things that's really interesting is this masking slide, because what the masking slide will do is it will actually hide and shadow that sharpening that you've actually induced in the image. So the masking slider is very important, and it's a fine adjustment at the end just to make sure that you're not overdoing that sharpening. Now here's the real key. Images that are noisy, if you sharpen them, you are going to accentuate that noise. And so it's really important to use sharpening and noise reduction tools in Lightroom with a balance between the two. So what I tend to do is, and I'm now going to go to an image, what I tend to do, let me just reset these sliders, and we'll take one of the images from the bird hide. So the image that Luke actually commented on was one of a nuthatch. And you can see here when I've zoomed in, you can see there's quite a lot of noise. There's no real color noise. I'll talk about color noise in a minute, but you can see that there's a real grain to it. What's great is the image is sharp. And if we just go over here, you can see my parameters. So I was at 95 millimeters focal length. I was at f4. My shutter speed was 1/160th of a second, and my ISO was 1600. So I was shooting really at high ISO. So let me just take this a little bit out. I'll zoom out here to, let's go to 200. Okay, so now we can see the detail of the bird's eye, we can see the detail of the bird's beak. And so what I tend to do, I can always push the Alt or Command key, and what that does is Lightroom temporarily adjusts it to black and white, and that can help me really visualize that additional sharpening detail or noise reduction detail. So it's always a good idea to use that Alt or Command or Option key to actually temporarily induce that black and white setting. So I tend to push the sharpening up to around about 90. I then reduce the radius down, and if I push that Alt key again and I move it down to 0.5, you start to see a silhouette of the fine detail that now Lightroom is sharpening. What I then do, I leave the detail at 25 and I tend to push the masking up. And now you can see with the Alt key, we go from a very bright silhouette to a very dark silhouette. And now you can see that localized adjustment. So anything between sort of 70 and 80, I'm now just sharpening those edges and not necessarily sharpening all that noise detail. So now I have something that I can start to look at in terms of treating the noise reduction. So here I have the noise reduction tool on the right side, and this is consisting of luminance, detail and contrast, color, detail and smoothness. Now I'm going to keep things really simple. I don't have any color noise in this image. If you shoot at very high ISOs, so 3200, 6400, you may get some color noise, in which case you can move that slider and it will help reduce that. But in my case, I do something very simple. I just use that luminance noise reduction slider. I can push down on the Alt key again and I can start to move this to the right. And at around about 30 to 40, I'm starting to lose that noise. I can reduce the detail down, and if needs be, I can add a little bit of that additional contrast, maybe to 25. And so now if I zoom out of this image, I have a really clean image. I can zoom back in, you'll see on the screen, there might be a little bit of fine grain there, but really for a small sensor camera shooting at ISO 1600, the results work very, very well. Today's video is a bit of a different one. I decided to do the tutorial because I think it's important to understand a little bit that photography is not always about what we do in the field, it's also about what we do in the digital darkroom. And understanding the capability of powerful tools such as Lightroom can really transform our final images. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, one of the myths with these Micro Four Thirds system cameras is that they have small sensors, and as a result their low light performance isn't as good as full frames. Yes, it's never going to be as good as a full frame camera in terms of low light capability, but that doesn't mean to say that it's not capable at all. I've been shooting with these camera systems for well over 5 years, and with that combination of that knowledge that I have with the camera settings to use, getting sharp shots, understanding how to use the in-camera body stabilization and the optical image stabilization of the lenses, I can get sharp shots, and then I can push my ISO in aperture priority mode to levels that enable me to get very clean shots by just using a very simple treatment in Lightroom. So I hope you found this tutorial useful. By all means, go away and practice. I think the more that you can practice and the more that you can do what I call that end-to-end process of obtaining the image in the field and then processing and developing it in Lightroom to get a final image, you'll get more comfortable and you'll understand exactly what the limitations and capabilities of these camera systems are. So if you liked today's video and you found the tutorial useful, please like, comment, subscribe. You'll be helping my channel out a lot. And tune back in, and I've got some more in the field, landscape, wildlife, and nature photography videos coming your way. So everyone stay safe out there and see you at the next one. Thanks.